In the bustling world of Hollywood, where dreams are made and shattered in equal measure, Keanu Reeves seemed like an unlikely hero. Born in Beirut, Lebanon, and raised in Toronto, his journey into the world of acting was far from conventional. Unlike many of his peers, who came from industry families or well-paved paths into stardom, Keanu carried with him a fragmented childhood, scars of abandonment, and the quiet weight of a soul searching for belonging. His father had left early in his life, his mother moving frequently, and his childhood was marked by instability. Yet even within that chaos, there was something that set Keanu apart, a gentleness in his spirit, a quietness in his demeanor, and a silent intensity that audiences would one day fall in love with. The first sparks of recognition came not through blockbuster action roles, but through subtle performances where his sincerity pierced through the screen. In River's Edge, 1986, he portrayed a conflicted teenager grappling with morality and friendship. It wasn't polished, but it was raw, and that rawness resonated. Hollywood soon took notice. He had an aura that could not be manufactured, a mixture of vulnerability, innocence, and unshakable presence. He was not the loudest in the room, not the most flamboyant, and certainly not the one constantly chasing attention. Instead, Keanu carried a quiet authenticity. It was this authenticity that would soon separate him from a generation of actors obsessed with image and fame. By the late 1980s, Keanu's career took a surprising turn when he landed the role of Ted in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. The goofy, time-traveling comedy could have easily typecast him as just another lightweight teen star, destined to fade away once audiences grew older. But even within the silliness, there was something magnetic in his performance. His laughter was unforced, his movements natural, his boyish charm undeniable. Viewers didn't just see an actor reciting lines. They saw someone who embodied the role without ego. While critics often dismissed the film as trivial, it became a cult classic, and Keanu Reeves became a name people remembered. Still, Hollywood was skeptical. Could someone like him, who seemed more at home in a coffee shop with a book than in flashing lights, really make it big in an industry that demanded charisma, arrogance, and ambition? The answer came in the 1990s, when Keanu reinvented himself as an action star. Point Break, 1991, showcased him as Johnny Utah, the rookie FBI agent infiltrating a gang of surfers led by Patrick Swayze's magnetic body. It was in this role that audiences first saw a new layer of Keanu, athletic, commanding, and believable as a man torn between law and loyalty. Suddenly, Hollywood couldn't deny him. He wasn't just the goofy Ted anymore. He was a leading man. Then came Speed, 1994. Cast alongside Sandra Bullock, Keanu's stoic intensity as Jack Traven turned the movie into an unexpected box office hit. The role demanded charm, bravery, and subtle vulnerability, all of which Keanu delivered effortlessly. Overnight, he went from being a rising star to a household name. Action studios began circling, offers flooded in, and his career trajectory seemed unstoppable. He had officially joined the ranks of Hollywood's elite. But what separated Keanu from others in that era was not simply his success. It was his refusal to embrace the Hollywood lifestyle that often devoured rising stars. While others flaunted their wealth, chased tabloids, and basked in red carpet glory, Keanu stayed away from the circus. His clothes remained simple: jeans, boots, and a well-worn jacket. He still took the subway when he could. He still preferred quiet coffee shops to glitzy parties. And while studios expected him to morph into the stereotypical arrogant star, Keanu resisted. He was famous, yes, but he never acted like it. By 1999, when The Matrix hit theaters, Keanu's place in history was sealed. As Neo, he became not only a global superstar but a symbol of rebellion, questioning, and hope. The film's groundbreaking special effects and philosophical undertones made it more than just another action movie. It became a cultural milestone. And at its center stood Keanu Reeves, the quiet kid from a fractured childhood, now embodying the role of the One. To many fans, it felt poetic. He wasn't the typical hero, yet his humility made the character all the more believable. Behind the scenes, however, Keanu was already different from the Hollywood machine. He gave away much of his Matrix earnings to the special effects and costume departments, saying they deserved it more. He turned down roles that didn't feel authentic to him, even if they promised bigger paychecks. He rode his motorcycles through the streets of Los Angeles, not with an entourage, but alone, lost in thought. The irony of Keanu's rise to stardom was that while Hollywood celebrated him, he never seemed to celebrate himself. His interviews were shy, sometimes awkward, filled with pauses and modest laughter. Reporters often noted how uncomfortable he seemed with compliments, as if fame was something thrust upon him rather than something he sought. He was not driven by ego, nor by wealth, nor even by recognition. He was driven by something quieter, a need to create, to tell stories, to connect in fleeting moments through art. And yet, in the middle of this success, a career most actors could only dream of, the first shadows of sorrow were already creeping into his life. While fans cheered for the rising star, behind the screen, Keanu Reeves was about to face heartbreaks so deep they would forever shape the quiet man he would become. Because as much as Hollywood celebrated his success, Keanu knew that fame and fortune could never shield him from life's harshest truths. And soon, those truths would come crashing down with a force that even the One could not stop. Hollywood has a way of painting its stars in bright colors, hiding the shadows that linger behind the curtain. To the world, Keanu Reeves was a rising hero, handsome, humble, and unstoppable. But behind that gentle smile, storms had already begun to form. Keanu's life, from its earliest days, had never been easy. His father had abandoned him when he was a child, leaving him with questions that would never be answered. His mother, though loving, struggled to find stability, moving the family from city to city. Even in his teenage years, Keanu carried with him the loneliness of a boy who always felt slightly out of place. And yet, none of that could prepare him for the heartbreaks that adulthood would deliver. One of the first devastating blows came in 1993. At the height of his early career, Keanu was riding a wave of success. Films like Point Break and Speed had transformed him into a household name. But amid the flashing cameras and cheering fans, Keanu lost someone irreplaceable. His best friend, River Phoenix. River was not just another Hollywood actor. He was a kindred spirit, a young man of extraordinary talent and sensitivity, someone Keanu deeply admired and trusted. The two had starred together in My Own Private Idaho, a hauntingly beautiful film that revealed a raw, vulnerable side to both of them. Their friendship extended far beyond the screen. River was like a brother. On October 31, 1993, River Phoenix collapsed outside the Viper Room, a Hollywood nightclub partly owned by Johnny Depp. At just 23 years old, he died of a drug overdose. The news shook the industry, but for Keanu, it was a wound that would never fully heal. He had lost not just a co-star, but a soul companion, someone who understood the weight of fame, someone who carried the same gentleness in a world too harsh for it. Keanu rarely spoke about River's death publicly, but those who knew him said the grief never left. It was as if a part of his heart had been buried with River that night. Still, Keanu pressed on, pouring himself into his work. In interviews, he would often say that acting was a form of escape, a way to live multiple lives when one's own life felt too heavy. And for a while, it seemed as though success might carry him through the pain. Then, fate struck again, and this time, the heartbreak was even more personal. In the late 1990s, Keanu fell in love with Jennifer Syme, a young actress and assistant working in the film industry. To outsiders, Jennifer was radiant and intelligent, someone who shared Keanu's quiet soul. Unlike the shallow relationships that often dominate Hollywood, theirs was real, built not on glamour but on genuine connection. They were deeply in love, and in 1999, they were expecting their first child together. A baby girl they planned to name Ava. For Keanu, who had always longed for family, this was a chance to build the stability he never had as a boy. But life, cruel as it often is, had other plans. On Christmas Eve, 1999, Jennifer gave birth prematurely. Baby Ava was stillborn. The loss devastated them both. For Keanu, the dream of becoming a father vanished in an instant, replaced by a grief too deep for words. Friends said he was shattered, drifting into silence, struggling to make sense of the tragedy. He buried himself in work once again, taking on the Matrix sequels, but the light in his eyes dimmed. The pain, however, did not stop there. In 2001, just 2 years after the loss of their child, Jennifer Syme herself was killed in a car accident in Los Angeles. She was only 28. For Keanu, it was a double blow. First the loss of his daughter, then the loss of the woman he loved. It was almost unimaginable, the kind of pain that could break even the strongest spirit. Yet Keanu endured it quietly. There were no public breakdowns, no dramatic interviews, no attempts to turn his grief into headlines. He retreated inward, carrying his sorrow with a dignity that only deepened the mystery surrounding him. Many in Hollywood speculated that these tragedies explained his reclusive lifestyle. Unlike other stars who flaunted their relationships and wealth, Keanu seemed almost allergic to the spotlight. He didn't chase fame, he tolerated it. He didn't seek luxury, he avoided it. When others celebrated loudly, Keanu remained quiet. Some mistook his silence for sadness, but in truth, it was something more profound, a choice to live differently. Still, the weight of his losses was visible in small ways. Photographs of him sitting alone on park benches, eating by himself, or walking through city streets in solitude went viral years later, giving birth to the "sad Keanu" meme. While many laughed at the image, calling it relatable or humorous, few realized that behind that picture was a man who had endured heartbreak most people could scarcely imagine. The meme made him an internet legend, but it also served as a strange reflection of reality, a glimpse of loneliness in the life of one of the world's biggest stars. And yet, Keanu never allowed tragedy to turn him bitter. He never lashed out at the world, never sought to drown his pain in destructive habits. Instead, he carried it quietly, like a shadow always following him. In rare interviews, when asked about loss, he would pause for long moments before answering. His words were simple but profound: "Grief changes shape, but it never ends." Those words revealed everything. Keanu Reeves had not escaped grief. He had learned to live with it. And in that silent endurance, millions of people began to see him not just as an actor, but as a symbol of resilience. His quiet life was not simply the product of introversion. It was a shield, a way to protect a heart that had already endured more than its share of pain. The personal tragedies of Keanu Reeves did more than shape his private world. They shaped his public persona, too. Fans saw in him something different from other celebrities, a man who carried scars, yet still chose kindness, a man who had every reason to give up, yet still chose to give. And it is in those tragedies that the truth behind his quiet life begins to unfold. For beneath the fame, beneath the wealth, beneath the roles that made him a legend, was a man who had lost everything, and yet still chose to live. Hollywood is a place of spectacle. Stars arrive at premieres in black limousines, cameras flash like fireworks, and crowds scream as though royalty has stepped into their presence. For most celebrities, this ritual is intoxicating, the adoration, the glamour, the validation of their fame. But for Keanu Reeves, the brightest lights always seem to cast the darkest shadows. And so, unlike his peers, he stepped away from the noise. To outsiders, this retreat often looked strange, even puzzling. How could a man who starred in Speed, Point Break, and The Matrix live so quietly? Yet that was precisely the paradox of Keanu Reeves. The bigger his fame grew, the smaller his personal world became. He avoided Hollywood parties, declined extravagant lifestyles, and chose simplicity over excess. It wasn't that he rejected success, it was that he refused to let it define him. One of the most telling glimpses into his private life came not through interviews, but through chance encounters on the streets of New York and Los Angeles. While many of his peers traveled in tinted SUVs with bodyguards, Keanu could often be seen taking the subway. Ordinary commuters would glance up from their phones and realize, to their disbelief, that Neo, the savior of humanity in The Matrix, was sitting quietly beside them, dressed in jeans and a worn jacket. He didn't wear sunglasses to hide from recognition. He didn't demand attention. He simply sat, sometimes reading, sometimes gazing out the window like any other passenger. One viral clip captured him offering his seat to a woman carrying a heavy bag. The gesture was small, perhaps even forgettable in another context. But because it was Keanu, the image spread across the internet like wildfire. Fans marveled at the humility of a man who could afford chauffeurs yet chose public transit, who could demand privilege yet gave up his seat without hesitation. It was this ordinariness, this refusal to act like a star, that made him extraordinary. But simplicity, for Keanu, often blurred into solitude. Over the years, countless photographs emerged of him sitting alone on benches, sipping coffee by himself, or eating quietly on the steps of a building. In 2010, one particular photograph caught the world's attention. Keanu, dressed in dark clothes, hunched slightly on a park bench, holding a sandwich. His expression was somber, almost weary, as if the weight of the world had settled on his shoulders. The internet dubbed it "Sad Keanu." Memes exploded overnight, people editing the image into absurd scenarios, laughing at the apparent melancholy of a man so rich, so famous, yet seemingly so lonely. What many missed, however, was the uncomfortable truth behind that image. Keanu had, in fact, no more loss than most people could fathom. To sit alone on a bench was not simply an act of sadness, it was an act of survival. Solitude was his way of coping, of finding moments of stillness in a life that had been anything but still. Where others filled their emptiness with crowds and noise, Keanu allowed himself silence. His lonely routine extended beyond public glimpses. Friends and colleagues often remarked on his habit of disappearing for long stretches, spending time on solitary motorcycle rides through the hills of Los Angeles or wandering through bookstores. He would arrive at film sets not in flashy cars but on his bike, helmet under his arm, walking with the calm gait of someone who carried no entitlement. At rap parties, while others celebrated with champagne and flashing cameras, Keanu often slipped away quietly, preferring a night ride under the stars to the chaos of fame. Yet this quiet life was not without generosity. Crew members from his films tell stories of how he would join them for meals rather than isolating himself in luxury trailers. On the set of The Matrix, he reportedly gave away millions of his earnings to the special effects and costume teams, saying they deserved it more than he did. "Money is the last thing I think about," he once said, and his lifestyle reflected that truth. He owned no sprawling Beverly Hills mansion filled with gold-plated decor. Instead, he lived in modest spaces, with a few books, his motorcycles, and the essentials of a man who valued simplicity over spectacle. To the world, this lifestyle appeared almost monk-like. For a man who could afford every luxury, Keanu lived as if he needed nothing but peace. But peace, for him, often came hand in hand with solitude. He ate alone. He traveled alone. He walked city streets alone. This pattern led many fans to believe he was perpetually sad, weighed down by loneliness. But those closest to him saw something different. A man who had made peace with solitude, who had learned that sometimes being alone is not a curse, but a choice. Even so, there is a haunting quality in Keanu's routine. For every photograph of him smiling with fans, there are just as many where his eyes reveal a depth of pain few can understand. His quiet life is not the life of a man hiding from the world, but of a man carrying it. Every cup of coffee on a park bench, every silent subway ride, every uncelebrated birthday spent out of the public eye, they are reminders that Keanu's world is not defined by Hollywood's endless hunger for attention, but by his own search for stillness. In interviews, when pressed about his lifestyle, Keanu often responds with disarming honesty. "I'm just a regular guy," he once said. "I like to read. I like to ride my motorcycle. I don't need much." The simplicity of those words belies their weight. In an industry where stars chase validation through extravagance, Keanu found freedom in ordinary rituals. Yet beneath that freedom lies the shadow of his past, the tragedies that taught him how fleeting joy can be, how fragile life truly is. The lonely routine of Keanu Reeves is not an accident. It is the product of a man who has seen life at its brightest and darkest, who has loved deeply and lost painfully, and who has chosen, in the aftermath, to live quietly. And while the world may joke about sad Keanu, the truth is far more profound. His solitude is not weakness, but strength, the strength to endure, to reflect, and to keep walking forward, even when the world feels unbearably heavy. For behind the subway rides, the solitary lunches, and the quiet nights, there is a man who has redefined what it means to be a star. Not through noise, but through silence. Not through wealth, but through humility. Not through company, but through solitude. And it is in that routine, lonely, simple, and unshakably real, that the sad truth of Keanu's quiet life reveals itself most clearly. Grief has a way of breaking people. For many, the weight of repeated tragedy would have been unbearable, pushing them toward bitterness, addiction, or self-destruction. Hollywood is filled with stories of stars who crumbled under far less pressure. But Keanu Reeves, though scarred, chose a different path. Out of pain, he carved strength. Out of silence, he found resilience. And in doing so, he revealed the hidden strength that has made him not just a beloved actor, but a symbol of endurance in a world where endurance often feels impossible. Keanu has never been a man who wears his scars openly. He does not rage at the world, nor does he seek pity from audiences or tabloids. Instead, he channels his emotions into his craft. Every performance carries a depth that can only come from lived experience. When he plays a character haunted by loss, it feels authentic because he knows that pain intimately. When he portrays a man fighting against impossible odds, it resonates because Keanu himself has fought against odds far greater than fame or fortune. The most striking example of this is The Matrix. Neo's journey is not simply one of action and spectacle. It is a story of awakening, of facing a cruel reality, and of choosing to fight for truth despite overwhelming despair. For Keanu, stepping into Neo's shoes was more than just another role. It was, in many ways, a reflection of his own life, a man burdened with knowledge of how cruel the world can be, yet still refusing to surrender. Audiences connected with Neo not only because of the groundbreaking effects or the thrilling fights, but because Keanu's performance carried something raw, a sincerity that elevated science fiction into something deeply human. Off-screen, his hidden strength manifested in quieter ways. On film sets, while other actors retreated to luxurious trailers, Keanu often spent time with crew members. He knew their names, asked about their families, and treated them not as subordinates but as equals. Stories emerged of him sharing meals with electricians, grip operators, and stunt teams. To Keanu, filmmaking was not a hierarchy but a collaboration, and he made sure everyone felt valued. Perhaps the most famous story of his generosity came during The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions. Reports revealed that Keanu gave away a significant portion of his salary, tens of millions of dollars, to the visual effects and costume teams. He reasoned that they were the real architects of the film's success, and they deserved the reward more than he did. In a town obsessed with money and credit, Keanu's gesture was unheard of. But to him, it was simple. He valued people more than wealth. This quiet generosity extended beyond his work. Countless unpublicized stories have surfaced over the years. A stranded motorist in Malibu recounted how Keanu pulled over on his motorcycle to help push a broken car to safety. Strangers have described how he struck up conversations in diners, listened more than he spoke, and treated everyone with the same gentle respect. There are tales of him buying meals for the homeless, funding children's hospitals, and even running a private foundation that donates to cancer research, all without attaching his name for publicity. "I don't like to attach my name to it," he once explained. "I just let the foundation do what it does." Strength, for Keanu, was never about power or dominance. It was about compassion, humility, and endurance. His personal interests reflected this philosophy. He found solace in riding motorcycles, not for the thrill of speed, but for the meditative freedom it provided. On the open road, helmet on, the noise of fame faded away, leaving only the sound of wind and the hum of the engine. Motorcycles became his therapy, his way of processing grief and finding stillness. He also turned to creativity beyond acting. In 1991, he co-founded the band Dogstar, playing bass guitar. The band never reached international superstardom, but for Keanu, it was never about fame. It was about expression, about finding joy in music. Later, he explored writing, publishing books that combined photography and poetry. These endeavors were less about commercial success and more about exploring different facets of his soul. They were reminders that strength is not only found in surviving pain, but in continuing to create despite it. Even in the face of public ridicule, Keanu demonstrated resilience. When the sad Keanu meme spread across the internet, many stars might have lashed out, demanded its removal, or retreated in anger. Keanu, instead, responded with gentle humor. He acknowledged it without bitterness, even joking about it in interviews. To him, the meme was not an insult, but a reminder of how people projected their own emotions onto his image. His ability to laugh at himself, and at the absurdity of fame, was another sign of his hidden strength. Colleagues often describe him as deeply professional, respectful, and kind. Directors speak of his dedication, his refusal to cut corners, his willingness to train tirelessly for demanding roles. Stunt teams, particularly those on The Matrix and John Wick, praise him for learning choreography himself, enduring months of grueling preparation rather than relying solely on doubles. His strength is not loud, not boastful, but rooted in persistence and humility. What makes Keanu's strength so profound is its quietness. In a world where strength is often equated with dominance or control, Keanu's version is softer, almost invisible, but no less powerful. It is the strength to endure unimaginable loss without surrendering to despair. The strength to live simply in an industry that glorifies excess. The strength to give generously without seeking recognition. And perhaps most importantly, the strength to remain kind in a world that had given him every reason to be bitter. When asked in an interview how he manages to stay grounded despite everything he has endured, Keanu gave a characteristically thoughtful response. "I try not to live thinking about what I don't have or what I've lost. I try to live with gratitude for what I've experienced, for the people I've known, and the moments I've had." Those words capture the essence of his hidden strength. Gratitude, even in the face of grief, became his shield. Keanu Reeves' story is not one of invincibility. He is not unbreakable, nor is he immune to sorrow. But his strength lies precisely in his vulnerability, in his ability to feel deeply, to suffer quietly, and to continue living with kindness. It is a strength invisible to tabloids, but undeniable to anyone who has ever seen him pause to sign autographs for fans in the rain, or heard him speak softly about love and loss. In the quiet resilience of Keanu Reeves lies a lesson the world rarely teaches, that true strength is not in how loudly we shout, but in how quietly we endure. Hollywood is a machine built to magnify everything: the glamour, the drama, the victories, and the downfalls. Most actors are swept up in it, either willingly or unwillingly, until their lives become indistinguishable from the characters they play on screen. But Keanu Reeves has always stood apart, choosing to write a different script for himself. If you watch closely, you'll notice a truth hidden in plain sight. Keanu's quiet life is not a tragedy in itself. Rather, it is the deliberate result of choices he has made after decades of surviving pain, navigating fame, and redefining what it means to live meaningfully. To understand why he has chosen this path, one has to look at not just the man who lost so much, but the man who still stands with dignity, resilience, and a philosophy of life that humbles even his greatest critics. Keanu could live in luxury if he wanted. With his filmography, his net worth, and his status in Hollywood, he could own mansions on every continent, fill his garage with rare cars, and surround himself with endless crowds of admirers. But instead, his home is modest, his routines are simple, and his public presence is often startlingly ordinary. He is often seen traveling on the subway, waiting quietly like any other passenger, or strolling through city streets with little more than a backpack on his shoulders. For some, this humility feels almost alien in a world obsessed with wealth and status. For Keanu, however, it is the only life that feels real. He has said in interviews that material wealth never truly mattered to him, because he had already seen firsthand how fleeting everything can be. Money cannot protect you from grief. Fame cannot shield you from loneliness. And applause fades quickly once the lights dim. What remains is your character. And Keanu has built his life around protecting that core. Yet his quiet life is not just about retreating from the spotlight. It is also about how he connects to the world in ways that matter. Stories of Keanu's generosity are legendary. Giving away millions from his Matrix earnings to special effects and costume teams, buying motorcycles for stunt crews, or helping out struggling colleagues without ever seeking recognition. These gestures reveal a deeper truth. His silence is not emptiness, but focus. Instead of filling his days with endless noise, he invests his energy in what feels authentic. Acts of kindness, passions that bring him peace, and relationships that are rooted in sincerity rather than fame. His quiet life is a reflection of values most of Hollywood has forgotten. Values like humility, gratitude, and presence. This perspective often confuses the outside world. When paparazzi capture him eating alone or walking through the city streets, the images go viral with captions about loneliness or sadness. The sad Keanu meme became iconic for this reason, painting him as a man forever weighed down by his past. But the truth is far more complex. Yes, he has carried tragedies most could not endure, but his quiet solitude is not always sorrow, it is peace. It is a man who has learned that happiness is not about constant company or endless parties, but about finding meaning in small, genuine moments. Sitting on a park bench with a sandwich, taking a late-night ride on his motorcycle, writing poetry, or simply breathing in the world without needing to dominate it. These are not signs of sadness, but of wisdom. And perhaps that is the saddest truth of all. Not that Keanu Reeves lives quietly, but that society sees quietness as something broken. We live in a culture that equates solitude with loneliness, modesty with weakness, and humility with insignificance. Keanu's life exposes the flaw in that thinking. By choosing simplicity, he has freed himself from the very cage that traps so many others. He does not need to prove his worth with possessions or attention. He does not need to fight for headlines or validation. He has already found the only thing that truly matters: peace within himself. As the credits roll on his story, though it is far from over, we are left with a question that lingers. What if the life we mock as sad is actually the life we secretly long for? A life free from the crushing weight of expectations, free from the need to perform endlessly for the world, free to live with quiet dignity. Keanu Reeves shows us that such a life is not only possible, but perhaps the greatest form of success. And in that, the sad truth behind his quiet life transforms into something else entirely. A mirror, reflecting back to us the choices we might make if we had the courage to walk away from the noise.